Hi, our guest today is Building Commissioner John Erickson, and my co-host Al Holman's not here today. John, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin.
John, this is airing at the end of the year, and in January, you're going to start enforcing parts of the new sign bylaw that you haven't been enforcing. A lot of people don't understand the law. A lot of people are up in arms about parts of it. The biggest issue seems to be signs in people's yards. What's the role? What's it say you can do and not do?
The simple answer to the question of what can you have for a sign on a residential property is that you may have one sign all year round, permanent, be it freestanding or mounted to the building, in addition to a possible home occupation sign, which is also a provision of the sign bylaw.
Now that permanent sign you just mentioned, is there a size limit on it?
There is, up to 6 square feet, not to exceed 6 square feet.
Okay, and what does permanent mean? It's mounted on metal poles, it's attached to the building?
Permanent would mean attached to the building, whether it's parallel to the face or perpendicular, mounted on some sort of frame in some circumstances, whether it be a carved wooden sign. It could be a freestanding permanent sign, which would be something that's mounted on some sort of durable material meant to be displayed.
So we're not talking
indefinitely.
2 little aluminum spikes in the ground?
We're not talking 2 aluminum spikes in the ground.
Which brings us to the temporary signs.
Temporary signs, yes. Temporary signs have a definition in the new sign bylaw, as do portable signs.
Okay. And you're allowed to have one of those in your yard?
Temporary and portable signs are prohibited with exceptions.
Which are?
Relating to a one-time event.
Okay.
Any time of year, you may have one temporary or portable sign relating to a one-time event.
I put up a sign that says, play at Milford High School auditorium on this weekend. That qualifies?
That qualifies with time restrictions. No more than 45 days prior to the event, and must be removed within 72 hours of the event.
Okay.
So yes.
And during election months in the spring and fall, you can have more than one, correct?
During the air quote election months, March, April, September, October, November, you can have up to 4
signs.
Temporary signs relating to a one-time event. So
with the same thing, 45 days before the event and X number of hours, was it 72 hours after?
Yes.
Okay. Town election, first Monday in April or whatever date it is, you can put it up in March, you have to take it down within a day or 2 after the election.
Within 72 hours is the letter of the law.
Okay. So now we come to the infamous "We support our Milford police" signs.
Were there already?
They're not legal under this new bylaw, correct?
Correct. In the ones that have been displayed to date, they meet the definition of a temporary or portable sign, which is prohibited.
Because they don't refer to an event.
In the same fashion that firewood for sale may be prohibited, or would be prohibited, stump grinding, driveway sealing, roofs by...
But I could put up a permanent firewood for sale sign.
You could.
Within the size guidelines.
You could.
Could I take the "We support our Milford police" sign and screw it into the front of my house so as you drive by it's facing the road?
Again, it would have to not meet the definition of temporary, so it would have to be, and I wish I had the exact word with me, but
it's okay.
no, to just screw that sign to your house, no, because that's still by definition made of lightweight material that's not intended to be displayed permanently.
Okay.
Now, if you were to put that in some kind of a case that would be meant to be displayed permanently, then yes.
Okay, I built a nice frame around it, I put it under glass.
Again, in the context of the bylaw, that would now be a permanent display, a permanent sign meant for permanent display based
Okay.
on in part, the enclosure of it.
Right.
And yes, that would then be legal.
Okay, now you have not enforced anything about these signs yet.
Well, you've kind of fast forwarded right to the last phase of our enforcement, ignoring
Okay,
all
let's
the
go to the first
enforcement that we've
phases.
done.
Well, let's go to the first
We should
phase of
really
it.
start from
All right, tell me.
the beginning.
Okay.
Right, so there was a Supreme Court of the United States decision back in June of 2015, which, when reviewed, it came to light that our current sign bylaw was probably not enforceable because it was a violation of our
Right.
rights.
Because that court decision, Gilbert versus Arizona,
Yes.
said enforcement must be not related to the content on the sign.
Yeah. The effective message is that sign regulations must be content neutral. So that led
Right.
to the understanding that our then bylaw regulating signs was probably unconstitutional. So the planning board set forth to rewrite our sign bylaw, and they spent, the better part of a year working on that. And there were a number of incarnations along the way.
Town meeting approved it in May of 16,
Town meeting approved it in May of 2016.
and the Attorney General's Office of Massachusetts said, yes, that meets constitutional muster. They did that somewhere around August of 16.
It was 90 days to the day of town meeting, August of 2016.
Okay.
So at that point, that was our now in effect sign bylaw.
So you could begin enforcing sections of it.
We couldn't begin enforcing the entire bylaw. The
Right.
direction we chose to go was to start with the signs on commercial properties first. We felt that those were the most egregious violations at that time. So we went to inspect most or all of the businesses in town, and we've been working since then to gain compliance, gain awareness, inform the businesses of what the new bylaws are and what their options are if they have signs that are in violation, because in most cases, they could modify their existing signage to become compliant.
Correct.
They may have temporary
Okay.
ones that could be,
Made
replaced
permanent.
with permanent ones. So that was our first wave of sign enforcement.
Okay.
And then we moved on to residential. And this concept of temporary versus permanent, a lot of people are having a hard time digesting, so we began more with the size regulations on residential properties, because we had
Okay.
a few properties that were in violation of that.
So if I put up a 10-foot by 10-foot sign or 4x8 sign,
If you
On my front
exceed,
lawn,
if you
it's
exceed the
not
12
legal.
square feet, and we weren't out there measuring to the inch, but
Yeah.
when you can tell that it's double or triple the allowable size from 100 feet, then
4x8 piece of plywood saying, elect me to governor's council.
right. So we started with
Okay.
the residential size violations, and I've put out several memos to the Board of Selectmen. I believe they've maybe made a public statement or two trying to gain awareness of what the regulations are and what's allowed and what's not.
Right.
And,
And you
so-
actually have a very easy-to-read guide that's accessible from the homepage of the town's website.
We do. We have a little summary
It's a
and a frequently asked question page that
Right.
I developed to try and answer all the questions that I received along the way.
And if I remember, it's very easy. There's one page on residential, one on commercial, and one page of questions and answers.
Correct.
And it's very easy to read.
I hope so. That was the intent.
Okay, and it's on the homepage of the town website is a link to it.
It is, milfordma.com.
Okay. So we're in late December. You have not yet enforced the temporary signs, am I correct?
You are correct.
And you plan on doing that starting January.
Starting the first week in January, yes.
Okay. So the biggest offender in town seems to be the "We Support Our Milford Policemen" signs.
That's a possibility.
Okay. Now, most people who put them up probably thought it was a political sign or making a political statement, but it doesn't relate to the right months.
Well, it may be a political sign, but that's one of the portions of the bylaw that we revised, political signs used to be exempt from our bylaw, and I would certainly call that a political sign. And
Only now they're only allowed in,
No, now we can't govern by content, and by
That's right.
nature, political sign is, you're determining content, so that's the biggest problem. And for years, everyone knew political signs were exempt, so I understand, the proliferation of these signs that really coincided with the Attorney General's adoption just by
coincidence.
coincidence.
Right, a local businessman decided to give them out. People decided they liked them, and they began putting them up.
Correct.
Okay. So this is not a move to say, I don't like those signs. You're actually enforcing a law passed by town meeting.
Yeah, let's be clear. This isn't my personal view. This is my day job, which is enforcing the zoning bylaw,
Okay.
which was promulgated by the planning board and adopted at town meeting.
So if people want to change or modify that rule so they could have those signs on their lawns, they need to go to the planning board or,
The best course of action, if you feel strongly that you want to allow this type of signage, is to approach the planning board and see if they'll support that. And if they will, that's probably the best avenue to support.
and they would then make an amendment to
They make
last year's bylaw change.
They'd revise the wording to,
And it would go through a public hearing and then go to town meeting for the necessary 2/3 vote.
correct. And if they weren't on board, it only takes an article be drafted and sponsored by, a certain number of registered voters, which I think is 10, but I'm not.
I
Not
think it's
positive on
10
that.
if you already have a meeting and it's 100 or 200, depending on what town you're
Well,
in.
it was
if you don't
10
have
if
a
it still
meeting.
goes through the public hearing process, I
Right.
believe.
Right,
But that's not my area of
Okay.
expertise.
all right.
But it's
so
a fairly
basically,
easy
your
avenue.
hands are tied in enforcing this starting in January. You have to begin enforcing it at some point.
Yes, and
Okay.
I just thought it was better served by getting the awareness out there first rather than
Okay.
just starting on day one with telling people that there's violations that they really had no idea of.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to give you forum to talk about that because I've heard a lot of people talking about, like, why are they attacking that one sign? It's not that one sign. It's any sign that meets that criteria.
Yes, and that would be, again, the examples, stump grinding, landscaping by so-and-so, some of, to get to the real nitty-gritty, you may be able to have a little construction sign because it's advertising the instruction that's going on there. That's a one-time event. But it's, we've always had a provision for that.
So a guy can put it up on the day he's grinding my stump.
Yeah, and it needs to be removed technically within 72 hours after. So there's some provisions for that, and I think there's some desire to enable that.
Right. I mean, your intent is not to not let the little guy advertise, or whoever wrote the bylaw, I should say.
Well, yeah, that wasn't my intent to do my job and enforce the bylaw.
Right.
And I can't speak completely to their intent, but that's my understanding of.
Right. So if I'm having my driveway paved and the contractor wants to stick a sign in my lawn while he's doing it, and let's say it takes 2 days to excavate it and repave it, you don't see a problem with it being there for those 2 days.
No.
Right.
And, technically 72 hours following the
'cause
event, so.
I don't think a month later it does any good, but while they're working, people, who's doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's allowed.
Okay. So any temporary sign not related to an event is illegal. Do I have that right?
Okay, we're still talking about on residential properties.
On residential property.
Temporary, yes, you're effectively right. Temporary and portable signs are prohibited except pertaining to a one-time event.
Okay.
So if we can determine that it's pertaining to a one-time event and it meets the time restrictions, before and after the event, then it's allowable.
Okay. I know zoning is a deadly, dull, complicated subject for most people, and I'm sure it's pained you to go through this line by line to figure out how to enforce it. but I don't think people understand what it, now that you have to enforce it, what it means.
Well, the situation with zoning enforcement is that you basically have a 50% satisfaction rate. When you have a neighbor dispute, one's happy at the end of the result. It's similar to an umpire or a referee.
Right.
Making
Right, lousy call or great call.
yeah.
Depends on which side of the field you're sitting on.
And that is the case with zoning in many times, not every situation, but it's
Okay.
it's difficult, but
Well, there is one exception, though, to this, correct? If we're talking about a ball field or an athletic field, if an organization wants to erect signs, the department in charge of like an athletic field governs that, correct?
correct. Signs displayed within an athletic complex, not visible from outside the athletic complex, are governed by the board
So if it's
that controls the athletic complex.
let's say it's a field overseen by the park commission, they're in charge of what appears there.
Yeah, that's simple. So Rosenfeld Field, which has traditionally had these signs,
Right,
displaying advertisers, they're still allowed,
okay.
based on the
What about
bylaw.
the Milford High School complex?
same.
If the-
They'd be allowed within the complex.
And then the school committee is in charge of
School
that?
committee would
or
have
school department
jurisdiction.
and school committee, okay. I'm just trying to get it out
Yeah,
there. I
no,
mean, it's a tough law. I mean, what's the zoning bylaw in Milford? A couple of, 60, 80 pages long? I mean,
it's probably 60 pages
yeah,
long.
it's complicated, and the sign section alone was 7 or 8 pages, so.
And a lot of it, you have to rely on case law.
Right,
And of course, town council is much better suited to talking about that and the Gilbert versus
Arizona.
case.
Right, and you sat down with him to go over this law before deciding to enforce it in the phases that you did.
I reviewed it extensively with both town council and town planner, who was, working with the planning board to develop the
Right.
sign. And extensively on more than one occasion. We wanted to make sure we were not overlooking something, and we were getting the decision
Okay.
right.
Now, let's switch gears. We've got some time left. Part of your job, I think, is the good part is you hand out the building permits for construction and oversee it. But let's stay on the enforcement side. You're part of the town's task force that, as part of your daily duties, and on special occasions you go out and look at neighborhoods, but really as part of your daily duties, you're always reviewing occupancy permits that come up for renewal, looking at properties to make sure they're up to code.
Well, yeah, that's the daily activities of the building department or Department of Inspections. The task force that started about five and a half years ago, and was dealing with some serious problems at that time. It required the collaboration of several town departments in order to get results.
Board of Health, Fire Department,
Board of Health,
Police
Fire,
Department,
Police.
you.
And that, the shape of that task force has shifted over the years, because now the Department of Inspections has more regulations at their disposal to enforce.
Right.
So we have regulations, the nuisance bylaw, which was adopted in 2012, I believe, at town meeting.
Right. I know just recently the Board of Health fined a property owner from Franklin for excessive trash at 2 properties.
They did. But we have more parallel rules with the Board of Health now than we did before. So previous to 2012, we didn't have much enforcement mechanism for, we'll just say junk left in people's yards or at the
Right.
curb.
And now you do
The
because
Board of
it's-
Health still has all of their regulations, and they actively enforce them, but we have the nuisance bylaw that we enforce as well.
And do you cite people for having a nuisance?
Oh, absolutely.
And what do they get told? Clear it up, clean it up? Or,
Well, we give them a period of time based on, how severe we think the violation is and how long, they may need to clean up something. I mean, some things just
Right.
can't be cleaned up overnight. And we do our best to work with them, but we send them a letter giving them a time period, which could be 7 days, could be 30 days, could be 45 days.
and if they don't comply, then what happens?
If they don't comply, I mean, we send them a few more letters. then we'll either cite them, we can issue monetary citations daily, or we can go file actually an application for criminal complaint at district court, which we
Right.
do many times a year, many being, a dozen or so, not a dozen or so.
Excuse me. But how do you find the properties if you're not going out there every day?
Well, we are out every day. We're out doing zoning inspections, inspecting neighborhoods, both myself, my assistant, and we just find them in our travels as well. I mean, I'm doing building inspections all over town, which, you can't help but notice, and that's your job, to notice what's going
Right.
on in the neighborhoods. It's no different finding a zoning violation in terms of nuisance as it is finding somebody, changing the roof without a permit, or changing the windows, sidings, decks, all the things that are building code related, but it's our job.
Right. And then you go through the process. Do most people comply right away?
Most do. Most people want to be in compliance.
Yes.
And that's not to diminish, the task force, because we still do go out regularly. We still walk the neighborhoods. It's just that the number of violations we were finding while we were walking, we used to spend the whole day on a street between the observations, the notes, the pictures, and then going back to the office to generate all the appropriate paperwork. We were now spending our hours walking and really not finding anything. So
That's good.
that is good. That's progress. That's results. So, we still do it. We still do it regularly, but we don't do it as often as we did
Because they're getting cleaned
because
up.
the results weren't there.
Are there any areas that tend to be prone to violation, or is it all over town?
Well,
or-
it's the streets off of downtown, streets nearby Main Street are repeat offenders in many cases.
Is it because it's mostly not owner-occupied, or is it just mostly it's much denser than the outside areas?
I think it's more that it's not owner occupied, and tenants, landlords sometimes lose control over their tenants, and you just can't always control what your tenants are going to do.
Okay.
Something I would like to mention is that part of the building inspector's role is to inspect multifamily houses periodically, multi being 3 and above.
And they need to get a certificate from you every so many years, correct?
They need to get a certificate from me every so many years, yeah. So since 2012, we have been actively scheduling and performing these inspections. So we've gotten into, not all, but many and most multifamily apartments, and we're getting into the buildings, into the basements, into the actual apartments, and giving those a fairly thorough inspection. And it's a general safety inspection, not necessarily a code inspection, because these older apartments aren't going to meet today's code, nor does today's code require them to, except
Right.
for, with some exceptions. But
Health and safety things.
that's something that we started about a year after the task force, and it does go hand in hand with the task force, but that's a totally different and more beneficial effect than just walking neighborhoods and seeing the buildings from the outside. We're seeing them from the inside.
Right. So, but if people do see something, who should they report it to? Your office?
Yeah, they should report it to my office. Well, it depends on what it is, but what I can say is if you report something that you have a question about the legality of, virtually any department in the town hall will channel it to the proper department. We channel
Okay.
things to other departments. They may be health related, maybe police related, maybe fire related. And each of those departments do as well, but the town clerk does. The Board of Selectmen's office will send it down.
Okay. You also have there's an email link right on the town website.
There is.
I think it's on the homepage.
There's both. We call it the task force email, and there's also a phone number to report
Okay.
a potential violation.
Okay.
And we encourage people to do that, because let's face it, nobody knows what's going on in an individual neighborhood more than the residents that live there. We can walk through someplace 10 different times and see nothing, but the people that live there day in and day out, they know what's going on, if you have a concern, use the 800, it's not an 800 number, use the, honestly, I don't know what the number is.
It's a
but
voicemail.
Use the local number, use the email, call
Okay.
the Department of Inspections.
Now, if I make a phone call, I don't have to leave my name, do I?
You do not.
Okay. Obviously, email does leave a trail. So if I send you an email, obviously you know it's from me.
Yes.
Do you get back to the people if they leave a name and phone number, or they leave their, or you have their email? Do you get back to them and tell them what the result is?
We don't necessarily. We do at times. Each case is an individual basis.
Right. Okay.
You know,
But they are looked into.
they are all looked into, absolutely.
Okay. And Erica Robertson, who's your zoning enforcement assistant, she's out all day long, correct? Or at least 3/4 of a day.
She's in and out of the office all day long. She spends a few hours at the beginning of the day in the office doing paperwork either from the day before or whatever's happening at the moment. And then she goes out after that and does inspections, and again in the afternoon and does inspections. So she's...
And now, what about where the planning board puts a condition on a site review for a business? Who inspects that?
That's our inspection and our enforcement.
So you do that as well?
We do. We, you know, initially we don't issue a certificate of occupancy until the site plans met exactly as it was accepted by the planning board.
Right, so if the planning board says, let's say it's a used car dealer, and 6 spaces for displaying unregistered vehicles, and no outside parts, as you drive by that, or you look at that, you pull up what the conditions are and make sure they don't have 7 cars out and don't have auto parts in the yard.
We do. Of course, we don't have every site plan with us as we're out doing inspections, but
Right.
if we see something that doesn't look right, we'll go back to the office
And look it up.
and look at the site plan.
Yeah.
We will get complaints about, you know, that's probably the biggest complaint we get is either the class 1 or 2 license holders or or just those with a special permit to allow unregistered having more than they can. And we do write up. We either meet with the businesses or actually cite them and tell them that they're not in compliance, give them a certain amount of time to get in compliance.
Right,
And
but you have cases where somebody said, I'm going to plant a row of bushes here, and they may have planted them, but, you know, they died, the property's sold, and the next owner doesn't know, rips them out. Eventually, you go back and say, hey, you're supposed to have this.
we do.
Okay.
We do, and that's, you know, that's our responsibility, but it's maintaining what the planning board approved in
Right.
in the process.
Okay. So on one hand, you're enforcing the local stipulations the planning board put on or the zoning board put on somebody, and the other one, you're more into the state building codes.
Yep.
And the town zoning.
Yes.
Okay. And on top of that, you're also doing building permits for new construction and monitoring those.
And home occupation permits, and
Okay.
we have a long list.
The economy certainly has started to come back from, 4 or 5 years ago. Are you seeing a lot more building permits?
We saw a large, substantial surge in permits starting in 2014.
Okay.
and
Has that continued?
That has continued. 2014, 2015 were almost identical in terms, in every aspect. Number of permits, cost of construction, permit fees received. And the last comparison I did in 2016, we were on pace to slightly exceed that.
Wow. Even without a hospital or a big dental office building coming in? And
Yes,
that's pretty, shows
Yes.
healthy growth.
it does. And a drastic increase in those 3 years over 2011, 2012,
Yeah, well, the
2000,
economy just wasn't there.
2013. But the permits really, in 2014, I guess they were a sign of things to come, because I don't think anybody at that stage would have said we're in
Turnaround.
a turnaround, but our numbers indicated that we were.
Okay.
And our numbers compare back to the big years of 2004, 5, and 6. So we looked at it over that time period.
Okay.